MrBeast is now facing a war on multiple fronts. On one hand, it seemed like the commentary channels and Dogpack 404 talking about him were dying down a little bit. The controversy was kind of going under the rug, or at the very least, it wasn't being talked about as much on a mainstream scale. And mainstream media articles about his Amazon Prime series Beast Games had similarly begun to fade from the spotlight. But now he and Amazon have a massive lawsuit on their hands. So, yeah, I guess today we're going to be learning how MrBeast became MrBeast's own worst nightmare. Haha. See what I did there? Shout out to Chris, but I love Sunny. On September 17th, 2024, journalists obtained a copy of a legal complaint against MrBeast and Amazon, wherein 5 unnamed contestants filed a class action lawsuit in Los Angeles court, claiming they weren't paid enough for their time on Beast Games and that they were deprived of proper medical care, food, and sleep. Now, this kind of claim seems very consistent with prior articles where contestants made the same claims, like the one from the New York Times, which we went over in my video from a bit ago. There were contestants saying that they weren't given enough food, or they weren't given food at all. There were contestants saying that they weren't given their medications when they were supposed to receive them. Female contestants saying they weren't given female products, like, you know, because girls bleed or whatever. And now in this new lawsuit, there are a lot of those same claims, from sexual harassment to chronic mistreatment, and they even cite an employee handbook that we've also read on this channel. Now, I have a copy of the lawsuit here, and I thought rather than just summarize the articles about it, it would be interesting for us to actually read the lawsuit itself and see what we can learn. Now, it is 50 pages long, so you're gonna have to bear with me here, but there is a lot of interesting stuff in this lawsuit that I think is probably going to get Jimmy fucked. If I had to guess, it's probably gonna get him and Amazon fucked over, probably deservedly so. Obviously, these are allegations, but with so many consistent claims and so many people saying the same thing, and now a class action lawsuit being filed, it's likely that at least some of this is true. So we'll start with the introduction. Plaintiffs bring this action on behalf of themselves in a proposed class consisting of all individuals who are engaged as purported contestants in the Beast Games content production. They censored the location here. I think they're talking about Las Vegas here because that is where the major controversy came from initially with Beast Games, so I believe this would be the Las Vegas shooting for Beast Games. Defendant production companies and Amazon shamelessly exploited the labor of approximately, and then they have a number of people here. It was probably, I believe, 2,000 people was the total amount. It is censored here, but I believe 2,000 people was the total amount that was sent to the actual stadium where they filmed. Approximately 2,000 people who served as contestants on the forthcoming 100 million MrBeast Amazon production, Beast Games, which Amazon promotes as the world's largest live game show with the largest single prize in the history of television and streaming. The Beast Games entertainment value arises directly from the physical and emotional labor of the contestants who compete under pressure cooker conditions for life-changing prize money, with one person purportedly to win $5 million in the end. Defendant MrB 2024 LLC, which is MrBeast's company, is a production company believed to be owned in whole or in part, directly or indirectly, by James Jimmy Donaldson, the creator and face of the YouTube-originated MrBeast brand. Mr. Donaldson, also known as MrBeast, is a 26-year-old content creator who, on information and belief, has the most YouTube subscribers in the world and is the first YouTube billionaire. The MrBeast entertainment empire produces stunt philanthropy, which typically features MrBeast performing corporate-sponsored, attention-getting philanthropy for publicity. The business model essentially is that MrBeast performs giving away some corporate money, whether pallets of cash, cars, or even houses, to strangers or followers, and his corporate sponsors compensate him with even more corporate money. And that does seem to be true. I mean, realistically, does MrBeast give things away? Yes, he does. Is that a good thing? Yes. But ultimately, it's not a totally selfless thing. You know, his company rakes in a ton of cash from these videos, and that's how he's able to continue making more and more videos. So, you know, the idea that it's a totally selfless thing is obviously not accurate. You know, obviously doing charity at all is a good thing, but realistically, it's not like he's doing it for totally altruistic purposes, right? He wants to make money from these videos, and he realized that if you give away a lot of money and it's a super kind of high stakes, you know, giveaway scenario, people are going to want to watch that, much like with any game show. You know, people like the idea of a bunch of people competing for the promise of getting a large sum of cash. They like to imagine themselves in that scenario where they could compete to win that much money. But with all the articles as well as this lawsuit, I would guess that a lot of people are going to have a very different view of taking part in a MrBeast production going forward. Defendant Amazon Alternative LLC is the unscripted television division of Amazon Studios, which reportedly was previously run by Mark Burnett at MGM Worldwide Television Group before Amazon Studios acquired the division in the Amazon MGM merger. Amazon creates content for Prime streaming service, which boasts over 200 million paid subscribers. And this was a huge announcement when it came out. You know, a lot of people were excited for the idea that MrBeast was going to make a ton of money off of the show, and also because, you know, he's a YouTuber first and foremost. He started on YouTube, and now he's gotten big enough to the point where these massive studios are willing to commit $100 million, which is a ton of money for any TV show.
1 billion, gajillion, fifillion.
But they're willing to commit $100 million to his specific thing and to give him full creative control. But as we know from my last video where I went over a Business Insider article, it seems like people at Amazon are now getting cold feet about the fact that he was given full creative control over this project because it's kind of become a disaster. These two commercial giants, MrBeast and Amazon, partnered with production company Off One's Base LLC to produce Beast games, which would be filmed in, and then they have a list of locations. I think what they're talking about here is Las Vegas specifically, if I'm not mistaken, because that is where the majority of these claims came from in the New York Times article. It was regarding the treatment of contestants in the stadium that they went to in Las Vegas. Mr. Donaldson, who has publicly represented that all MrBeast contestants get paid if they compete for just 5 minutes, gushed to his fans online about the bigger than ever scale of the Amazon-sponsored Beast games, stating that money was not a constraint and that Amazon had given Mr. Donaldson all creative control and the ability to do whatever he wanted. And this does seem to be the case based on the fact that, you know, if you look at interviews of Jimmy talking about Jimmy.
Not our Jimmy. Couldn't be precious Jimmy.
If you look at interviews of Jimmy talking about this situation and the fact that he wanted this, you know, money to produce a show, one of the biggest bargaining chips for him was that he wanted full creative control over whatever studio approached him. I believe he talked about how during negotiations, multiple companies actually approached him with a similar deal, but the thing that was really important to him was that he was getting the money and being able to maintain full creative control over the entire thing, which for any artist or content creator is obviously the dream, you know, to not have studio execs breathing down your neck and not have a legal department breathing down your neck of, you can't do that, you can't do this. But it seems like in retrospect, that probably should have been the case because this didn't go very well at all. Unfortunately, the supposedly magnanimous MrBeast did not want to use the alleged unconstrained resources to provide fair wages or even bare minimum legal working conditions to the contestants, whose labor comprised the core commercial value of Beast games. Instead, defendants employed superior bargaining power to coerce the contestants to sign unconscionable contracts with illegal terms and illusory obligations, and also knowingly mischaracterized the contestants to avoid defendants' employment obligations under California law. Defendants knowingly misclassified the contestants, in part, to obtain a tax credit for $2,252,523. Essentially, what they're saying here is that they didn't want to sign these people on as employees or official contractors, basically. They didn't want to sign them on that way because they wanted a tax credit for not doing so. A $2 million tax credit, by the way, which is, you know, pretty big. Even when stacked against the $100 million, that's pretty big. Defendants then induced, and we have a redacted piece of information here, to serve as contestants on their $100 million production based on a false representation that 1,000 people would be competing to win a $5 million prize, announcing only upon the contestants' arrival that there were more people there, is essentially what they're saying here, right? Because he had initially promised we're going to have 1,000 contestants. When people got there, he was like, actually, there's 2,000, which is seemingly not something they were upfront about, which would dilute the amount of money that each person gets individually for even being there. And on top of that, it would dilute the chances that they could win. You know, it's literally a halving of your odds. First, it was 1 in 1,000, then it was 1 in 2,000, which is a big difference. Defendants further relied on the misclassification as a false justification to avoid paying employment taxes and to spare the production the cost of implementing various employment protections required under California law, including minimum wages, overtime, mandatory meal and rest breaks, workers' compensation benefits, itemized wage statements, and timely payment of wages and reimbursements, among other things. Defendants then subjected the contestants to unreasonable, unsafe, and unlawful employment conditions. They redact some information, but I assume this is the date of whatever this happened. Defendants began the Beast games by, and then they have more redacted information, where the contestants were held under strict control and surveillance for days on end. And then there's a bunch of redacted information, so I'm not really sure what's going on here, but we can try to guess it with further context clues as we keep reading. During the Beast games engagement, the on-set production staff maintained the strictest control over contestants. And then they, once again, have a bunch of information blacked out, but I think these are probably the names of the people here because, you know, they're going with unnamed contestants, so it is redacted. Denying them all privacy and access to the outside world. The contestants were fed sporadically and sparsely. They were not given adequate access to hygienic products or medical care. The New York Times reported that over a dozen people who took part in the first installment of Beast games said they had not received adequate food or medical care, and that some competitors had suffered injuries from the physical challenges. And this is an accurate representation of the New York Times article. If you were to go through that again, you would see a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Just to bring up the article here real quick, which I do have, the author writes, one meal described by several contestants included a tiny portion of cold oatmeal, one hard-boiled egg, and a few pieces of raw vegetables. Meals throughout the games were small and sporadic, contestants said. It was difficult to keep track of time without watches or phones, but contestants estimated they had been fed twice a day, once in the early morning and again in the afternoon or evening. Obviously, this is not enough, right? This is not enough food for people, and the food they were being fed was not very good. People with food allergies and dietary restrictions said they had experienced even more trouble. Before the competition, contestants filled filled out forms detailing their dietary needs. An FAQ document provided to contestants in advance of the event and reviewed by the Times said all dietary and food restrictions would be taken into consideration, but several contestants said they had been served food they were allergic to and that alternatives had not been provided. "We were treated horribly," one contestant said. "They took on this challenge of 2,000 competitors. They should have known they needed an enormous crew to handle this correctly." And now the lawsuit gets into the treatment of the female contestants in particular, writing, "The female contestants particularly and collectively suffered as a result of defendants' actions. The Beast Games work environment systematically fostered a culture of misogyny and sexism, where production staff did nothing," and then we have a bunch of redacted information there. "Female contestants were also denied," and then it doesn't say what it is there, but we can infer based on the New York Times article that this is in relation to feminine hygiene products. A quote from this article says, "One woman said that when she and a group of contestants who were menstruating during the event asked the production staff about getting their underwear more quickly, she had been told that it was not a medical emergency, and she recalled that a nearby member of the production staff had laughed at the woman's pleading." Going back to the lawsuit, we have a few lines that read, "Female contestants were also denied," and then some removed information, and then it says defendants callously dismissed, and then also some removed information. But I would assume this first line here is talking about the presence of, tampons or something like that. And then for the second line here, as far as callously dismissed, I think this would be in reference to the need for underwear. So it could be kind of flip-flopping both of these. But essentially what they're saying is, women were not given the proper products they need to function on a daily basis. Defendants' violations of California law have caused common injuries, in fact, that are redressable and conducive to a resolution as a class action, where all the following material facts are common to all contestants. Defendants offer the contestants equivalent compensation for equivalent labor. Defendants misclassified the contestants in a uniform manner. Defendants subjected all the contestants to the same material working conditions, including a hostile work environment for the female contestants. Defendants have improperly denied or delayed the contestants overdue wages, penalties, and or reimbursements. And they then go on to explain that essentially the reason why the plaintiffs here are using pseudonyms and they're not using their real names is because they're aware that, if their names are revealed to the public, obviously a lot of people are going to be talking about them and who their identities are, and they're going to be picking through their personal lives to, try to discredit them or just to get a better picture of who they are. And obviously that can be a very bad thing when you're dealing with a lawsuit. You want to have this lawsuit happen and you want to get a favorable result. And meanwhile, you have the public going through all your stuff and potentially causing more pressure on you and causing you to drop out. So we don't know the names of the contestants, and I think that is probably for the best here. Now we're going to skip around a bit to page 10, where the facts section begins, in which they start to make actual allegations of substance about the time on the Beast Games game. Beast Games game. Beast Games game. It reads, "The contestants who were selected and agreed to serve as contestants on the Beast Games 2024 production took part in what at the time appeared to be a thorough application and contestant vetting process. The first step was to submit," and then we have a bunch of redacted information, but I assume this is just information about themselves. "Once accepted, the contestants were required to put their lives on hold to provide labor exclusively for defendants in exchange for compensation and a chance to win a $5 million prize on Beast Games. The contestants incurred supposedly reimbursable business-related travel expenses, for which many, including contestant 2 and contestant 3 out of the 5 that are suing here in this class action, have not yet been reimbursed." So essentially it's like you agree to go to this event, right? You agree to go to this MrBeast thing. You're promised a certain amount of money to be there. You're also promised that for the travel costs, you're going to be reimbursed, because obviously if you don't live in Las Vegas, it's expensive to go there. And even if you do live there, you have to take time off of your job, which means you're going to lose money for that time. And according to this lawsuit, at least, they were promised that they would be compensated for those expenses, and apparently they haven't been. And they then once again reiterate that these contestants were employees under California law, but that the defendants, meaning MrBeast and Amazon, intentionally misclassified them to their economic advantage so they could get that big tax credit and so that they could pay them less. Now, one of the facts in this lawsuit reads, "The contestants were not volunteers. The contestants were promised and received compensation in exchange for their time on the Beast Games production. Additionally, Mr. Donaldson made public statements online that he had unconstrained control over Beast Games, and Donaldson had established a pattern and practice of compensating everyone who competes in the MrBeast competitions, win or lose, even if they competed for only 5 minutes. The contestants were not working for free for the Beast Games for any humanitarian or any other public service or charitable objective. Defendants hired them to work as contestants on a reality competition show. In reality, these people were the essential labor component to the entire production. Their work on the show was the entertainment product the defendants were marketing and selling for public consumption and profit. The contestants were told if they accepted the opportunity to work for MrBeast and Amazon, they would have to be available for, and then they give a certain amount of time here, which is once again redacted information, but we can assume it was probably at the very least a couple of days because that's how long they were supposed to be in the arena. And while they were working for defendants, they would not be able to accept any other employment. So once again, they had to take time off from work so they could be there. Defendants compensated the contestants throughout the course of the Beast Games production with both in-kind compensation as well as cash compensation, with defendants promising blank to every contestant that competed, basically. Now, a quick search on Google for what in-kind compensation is basically says it's a non-cash benefit that an employer provides in the form of goods, services, or privileges. And typically what this means is stuff like meals or medical treatment or health insurance. And in this case, it would certainly mean, meals. It would mean being given their medications on time. It would mean being reimbursed for the travel that they had to spend money on to get there, stuff like that. Throughout the Beast Games engagement, the contestants were induced to remain competing as defendants made it clear to all contestants that, and then they basically black out some information, but likely what I would guess they're saying here is that if you were to leave the production early, you'd have less of a chance of winning. So that's kind of what they're inducing here in my estimation, but I don't really know because I don't have the uncensored copy of the lawsuit, which no one really has right now apart from lawyers. Defendants have since requested and plaintiffs have provided blank from the contestants to pay them and also to reimburse them for their expenses. See figure 1 below. And if we try to see figure 1, we actually can't even see it. It's redacted. Contestants 2 and 3 have to date still not been reimbursed for any out-of-pocket expenses they incurred. And then we have some more blacked out information, but I assume this is for the time period that they were there. As a result of the combination of foregoing, the contestants cannot properly be characterized. And then we have another blank section here. Rather, they were at all relevant times employees who worked at the direction and control of each of the defendants, and for those defendants' ultimate profit. Basically, what they're saying here is these people are not just volunteers. They're not doing charity work. They are not being bussed here with no promise of any compensation. They were offered things ahead of time like pay, like being reimbursed for their travel. They were offered food. They were offered medical care while they were there. And ultimately, based on these allegations, that wasn't really carried out. And I would guess that, once again, at least some of those claims are true. Now, here they write, the contestants had no autonomy. Defendants exercised total control over the manner, means, and timing of the work performed by the contestants by controlling essentially every aspect of their lives during the production of the show. This included, but is not limited to, and then they have a bunch of different things listed here, which we can't read. There's words like requiring, controlling, preventing them, controlling, and directing. But once again, based on the New York Times article, we can kind of infer what they may be talking about here. The New York Times writes, despite reassurance that contestants' medications would be given to them when needed, several contestants said they had not received their medication on time, including one contestant who needed insulin, instead receiving it hours or even days after their scheduled dosing times. One contestant said she had initially been denied the food she required to take her medication and had been told by staff members that she didn't actually need to eat. After asking repeatedly, she was given a banana. Contestants were instructed to supply the production staff with a Ziploc bag containing 5 days worth of undergarments, which would be distributed to contestants once the games were underway. But several contestants said they had waited hours or even days to receive their clean underwear. Now, going back to the lawsuit here, they basically detail how these people were supposed to be at the arena at specific time frames, right? They write here, defendants require the contestants to be physically present on specific dates and times around the clock at locations dictated, controlled, and supervised by the defendants, at which dates and locations, and then we have some information redacted here. Defendants further required plaintiffs dedicate all of their time to the production during the production period, requiring them to miss other work if they had other jobs. Defendants also purport to control, and then we have some more redacted information here. Now, on page 14 of the lawsuit, we get into some stuff that seems very consistent with what the claims in the New York Times article were. Like, for example, Article 46 here reads access to personal belongings upon the contestants' arrival at the Beast Games, and then personal belongings are handed over. And as we can see from the article here, like the quotes I just read, we can see that it was probably referring to, underwear, medications, stuff like that, their phones. Article 47 reads restricted movement. Defendants corral the contestants into tightly controlled areas where they were actively supervised by production staff around the clock without any privacy. Article 48 reads no contact. Defendants exercise total control over the contestants, and then we don't know actually what's going on here as far as what this claim is because it's redacted information, but I would guess it's probably something having to do with their phones being taken away so they can't, communicate with the outside if they really want to. And on top of that, it could also mean that they were encouraged to not contact other contestants or stuff like that, probably because they thought that it could get in the way of the games, but ultimately the result of that is that people felt just like stranded and alone in this arena. Here they write about control over meals, writing the defendants controlled when, where, and what the contestants, and then a bunch of redacted information. But this clearly has something to do with the claims in the New York Times article about contestants not being given food on time, not being given enough food, not being given food for their medications when they need to take, obviously if you have medications, sometimes you have to take it with food, and some contestants claimed that that was not the case. They weren't given food, or they were even denied it or told it wasn't important, which is crazy, which is a very crazy thing to do. I don't know how the some of these people got hired or how it turned into this big of a disaster with this big of a budget, but seemingly they were really trying to cut corners with costs here, and it it didn't really work out.
He orchestrated it. Jimmy!
The limited sustenance that defendants provided afforded an unreasonable and insufficient caloric intake, which collectively, in a uniform manner, endangered the health and welfare of the contestants. During their time, the contestants had to suffer through, and then more redacted information here. Control over clothing is another thing listed here. Defendants controlled the clothing that the contestants wore, and this is probably in reference to the fact that they had to wear these specific outfits that you wear in a MrBeast competition, and their other clothes were basically taken away at the time that they arrived there. As we know from the article, they talk about how their undergarments were supposed to be given over to MrBeast production staff, 5 days worth of underwear, stuff like that.
Lingerie, sexy lingerie.
Article 51 talks about sleeping arrangements, and a lot of the information is redacted. But in the New York Times article, they did talk about this, and it reads, while contestants were free to leave the competition at any time, many stayed despite the conditions, hoping to win the grand prize. Those who made it past the first challenge were given toiletry kits and sleeping bags and slept on the stadium's turf floor. Article 52 here in the lawsuit reads, control over medications and recreational substances. Upon their arrival, defendants separated the contestants. Defendants did not allow contestants to, and then it doesn't say what, actually happened here, but once again, if we just want to refer colloquially,
you're throwing too many big words at me,
and kind of guess what they're talking about here based on the lawsuit. The Times article reads, despite reassurance that contestants' medications would be distributed to them when needed, several contestants said they didn't receive their medication on time, including one who needed insulin. So these people didn't have meds on them. They had to hand it over when they got to the stadium, and they're claiming they weren't even given their medications on time. And this can obviously result in serious injury or death for someone who is diabetic and needs insulin, which one contestant, based on the New York Times article, did claim that he did not receive his insulin on time, which can be extremely life-threatening. Now, next in the lawsuit, they write about dangerous conditions. The contestants were exposed to dangerous circumstances and conditions as a condition of their employment. Even without considering whatever confidential conditions existed behind closed doors while the Beast Games was being filmed, the contestants were subjected to dangerous conditions within the course of their employment. As local news reported, many contestants found it was the poor set conditions rather than the challenges themselves that proved to be the main difficulty. The contestants were penned into enclosed spaces, under conditions where they were underfed, overtired, and competing in stressful and exhausting challenges for a cash prize that could change their lives. The danger, moreover, was exacerbated by defendants' seeming failure to conduct background checks. I would guess, based on the history that we know about Delaware and how he wasn't background checked, I would guess they probably didn't background check these people, which is absolutely insane. Because you could have an 80-year-old man that's worked at the post office for 30 years, right? You could have a woman who works in finance, and next to them you can have a 18-year-old who's about to go to college, and then there can be a gang member, a member of MS-13 or something. You can have a convicted rapist if they're not doing proper background checks. And if that is true, that's obviously a terrible situation to put people in. They shouldn't be competing for a MrBeast challenge with criminals or whatever the fuck, right? That should not be the case. And here they actually cite a tweet from Twitter or X.com from Rosanna Pansino, who writes, I've received confirmation from 5 verified contestants that for the first round of Beast Games, a man named Armani Izzati was allowed to compete. He was previously charged with at least 20 counts for battery, kidnapping, pandering, pimping, and robbery. He pled guilty to the pimping charge, acknowledging the significant evidence against him. He allegedly also slept near female contestants before being kicked off the set for inappropriate behavior. Some of the female contestants confirmed being very uncomfortable around him. He's also friends with Jake Paul and other influencers. Why was there not adequate background checks to catch people like this? And the fact that this guy was charged and pled guilty to the pimping allegation.
Now these bitches better be out here getting my money. You know Hellenback is my bottom bitch. You know that, right?
Which is no longer an allegation, it's just a criminal charge, is confirmed by the outlet Sportskeeda, who writes, according to a report by Business Insider from 2020, Armani Izzati was a friend of Jake Paul's when the FBI raided their homes that year. Previously, Izzati had been charged with multiple counts of battery and kidnapping. Notably, Armani had pled guilty to charges of pimping in 2014. And obviously, having a guy like this around at your competition is fucking what is wrong? What is wrong with these people? How did this even happen? How is this guy involved? Typically when you're signing up for a MrBeast production, you're not going to go into it with the understanding that you're going to be around a convict. Even if you do go into it with that understanding, I don't think that should be the case where a tried and true, criminal who's been investigated by the FBI is in this competition. That's what the fuck is wrong with you people. I don't understand. On information and belief, there was sufficient medical staff to attend to potential actual injuries during the production. There were several reports of injuries. For example, in an online article, Scott Robin of Vital Vegas reported on July 19th that in a concerning twist to this story, a source claims Desert Springs Hospital has seen countless patients today coming from Beast Games due to lack of food and water. water. And that same article talks about hospital evacs and how the hospital couldn't handle the amount of people that were coming in from the Beast Games production because there were so many injuries and dehydrated people that it was like just filling up the entire hospital. So here the lawsuit reads, the contestants performed work that was in the usual course and scope of defendant's business. And once again, the purpose of them establishing this is to show that they deserve to be compensated monetarily because they functioned as employees, not as simple volunteers or something like that. The work that the contestants perform for defendants is not work outside the scope of defendant's core live entertainment content business, as would be the case, for instance, for a service provider providing ancillary production services, such as a food caterer. The usual course and scope of the defendant's production business has nothing to do with cooking or serving food. Here, on Information and Belief, the usual course and scope of the MrBeast as well as defendant Mr. B 2024's business enterprises is the production of live, non-scripted or semi-scripted entertainment content whose primary focus is on the contestants' reactions to extreme stress as they compete in intense and exhausting challenges to win life-changing money. On Information and Belief, defendants Off One's Base and Amazon Alternative are also in the business of producing live, non-scripted or semi-scripted entertainment content. The contestant and their reactions to extreme emotional conditions are the sine qua non of the MrBeast Games production. I don't know what the fuck a sine qua non is. Alright, so I looked it up on Google and it says an essential condition, a thing that is absolutely necessary. So once again, the greater point they're making here is that this sine qua non is the essential conditions that are needed for MrBeast's videos to happen and this TV show to happen, which are the contestants. So they are essential to this production. Therefore, it is a belief of the contestants that they should receive adequate monetary compensation. Now, after another section going over how the MrBeast production team / company essentially was misclassifying these people for a tax credit, they have a new section, and this is like a bombshell section, and it's titled, Defendants Failed to Provide a Safe and Healthful Place of Employment to the Particular and Collective Detriment of the Female Contestants who suffered sexual harassment. Production defendants created working conditions that jeopardize the safety of workers, including by not providing sufficient food or drink, taking away their access to blank, and I'm not sure what that is, not having adequate medical staff on site, and not providing reasonable medical care, forcing them not to sleep, and forcing them to participate in games that unreasonably risked physical and mental injury. Production defendants additionally created a toxic and hostile work environment for, in particular, the female contestants who suffered from blank, and I'm not sure what that is, as well as sexual harassment throughout the production, as more fully detailed below, which was not only noticed but allowed, and then another blank, by the production defendants. And apparently, this was allowed because of marching orders from the top. So here they're basically claiming this was allowed at the bottom level. These mistreatments were allowed because of the fact that at the top level of MrBeast production, this is the culture that they encourage. And here they cite the How to Succeed in a MrBeast Production Handbook, which we've already read on this channel, drawing quotes like, it's okay for the boys to be childish, and if talent wants to draw a dick on the whiteboard in the video or do something stupid, let them.
Draw pictures of dicks.
Like a man dick?
Really do everything you can to empower the boys when filming and help them make content. Help them be idiots. A document that appears to be a MrBeast employee handbook written in the first person from what appears to be Mr. Donaldson's perspective, titled How to Succeed in MrBeast Production, was published on the internet on August 13th, 2024 by Rosanna Pansino. This alleged MrBeast handbook provides insight into the boys will be boys working conditions that are seemingly promoted by Mr. Donaldson, which, if such MrBeast handbook is indeed distributed to MrBeast production staff, advises employees really do everything you can to empower the boys when filming and helping them make content. Help them be idiots. And if talent wants to draw a dick on the whiteboard in the video or do something stupid, let them, which are quotes directly from that document that we read. Now it says here, helping the boys make content, apparently translated to, and then we have a bunch of blacked out information, but I assume it's relating to some claim of sexual harassment or mistreatment or demeaning of women who are on the set. The apparent MrBeast ethos of helping the boys be idiots seemed to pave the way for production staff to allow, and then a bunch of blanked out information, so we don't know what the specific claim is here. Additionally, defendants knew or should have known, blank, I don't know what the information is there, because its own employment handbook, as detailed above, laid the groundwork for this collective sexual harassment and sexual harassment against female employees. And then we have some really specific claims, and I'm assuming the reason they're not getting super specific here, and that's why there's this giant blacked out document here, as if it's like a CIA document that, the government doesn't want to get leaked. The reason why that would be is because if you were to publicly release a specific claim, then what could happen is people could identify whoever was involved and, by extension, identify the people who are suing MrBeast, the contestants. Because here it reads contestants 4 and 5 witness, and then there's a bunch of blacked out information. We don't even know what the fuck this is. By refusing to intervene, once again, a bunch of redacted information, production defendants created, permitted to exist, and fostered a culture and pattern and practice of sexual harassment, including in the form of a hostile work environment. Another claim here says MrBeast created hostile conditions where women were forced to endure the severe embarrassment and unfair disadvantage of, and then once again, a ton of redacted information. Finally, they write here that the defendants, meaning MrBeast and Amazon and this other other production company, appeared to take no steps during the course of production to address these issues. At all relevant times, defendant's management, up to and including senior management and ownership, had actual and or constructive notice that the violence and sexual harassment detailed herein was occurring within the workplace. And so once again, the purpose of them describing this as a workplace is all related to this other move in here, which is to establish that these contestants were essentially employees. And the reason why they're saying workplace here is to establish this was a workplace. This was a place where Mr. Beast and these other defendants were responsible for these women's safety. And as a result, he needs to be held civilly accountable for that in this civil lawsuit. And they're getting even more specific than that. They're not only saying was it irresponsible, they're saying that people at the very top of this production company knew about what was going on and they failed to deal with it properly, which is really fucking bad. I mean, what else can I say about that? I don't know what further deep commentary I can really add there. Like, if women in your workplace are being sexually harassed or there's some violence going on, which is what this documents claiming, but they don't have any specific claims. If that is happening and people at the top know and they're not taking proper steps to stop that, or they didn't take proper steps ahead of time to prevent it from happening in the first place, it's big bad. It's big bad. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? The next section describes how the defendants made multiple false statements to the contestants in connection with Beast Games prior to the start of the competition. Specifically, the first claim they have is in regards to this idea that there would be 1,000 contestants when in actuality there were 2,000. Article 91 of the lawsuit reads, the Beast Games production represented to the Beast Games rules packet that the blank would be provided by defendants. So basically, probably food, medication, medical care, stuff like that. Defendants failed to mention, however, that these blank, if they could be called that, would be infrequently provided and just insufficient to the number of calories in each meal, or plaintiffs allege, by way of example. And then we have, once again, redacted information, but they're probably saying here, based on the New York Times article, that they weren't given food on time, they weren't given enough food, they weren't given their medications on time, stuff like that. Indeed, according to local news reports, countless Mr. Beast Games contestants were taken to the hospital, including for dehydration. Scott Robin of Vital Vegas reported that local Desert Springs Hospital had seen countless patients coming from Beast Games due to lack of food and water, and that the production had allegedly denied food to diabetics, denied water to contestants, and at least 2 individuals had seizures as a result. In addition to promising contestants that defendants would handle blank, defendants also promised in the Beast Games rules packet that blank, whatever this is, it's redacted. In reality, whatever this specific thing they were supposed to be provided was not provided, according to the lawsuit. Article H here, Section H, reads, the Beast Games production was so void of standards of reasonable care that Mr. Beast allegedly offered to cover the contestants' therapy. You need therapy for Beast Games? Chris is coming at you like a silverback, going silverback mode on you. Hey guys, it's me, Chris. You're alone with me now. What do you think's gonna happen, huh? You might need therapy after this one. After this goon sesh. You don't know what could possibly happen. My name's Chris Tyson and I'm freaking gay.
Today, we're gonna see if this straight person can survive as
being gay for 24 hours.
And if they can, they'll get $10 million.
The foregoing acts by defendants created an environment during Beast Games that was so void of humane standards that defendants ended up volunteering to cover the cost of the contestants' therapy. It was that bad. The combination of all the foregoing created an environment in which the contestants suffered severe emotional distress. Defendants, apparently aware of their severe distress they caused the contestants by their lack of reasonable care in conducting the production, allegedly offered to cover the contestants' therapy. And the importance of them establishing this for their purposes is obviously going to be, like, you know, if Mr. Beast and his production staff are offering therapy, then you must necessarily infer that something that would cause someone to need therapy happened, something traumatic or something emotionally distressing, physically distressing, something like that. Therefore, because they acknowledge that here, they also acknowledge that the prior claims that we've just made are probably true, right? Now they get into the plaintiff's individual experiences of these specific contestants. Contestant 1 understood that they would be compensated by Mr. Beast, Amazon, all these people for their services, but apparently it took more than 30 days after his conclusion of services to pay him. Contestant 2, meanwhile, says they still have not received any money for their services. Contestant 3 also says they haven't been paid. Contestant 4 is a female employee who was a part of the Beast Games production. They say they were stuck on the production for multiple days, although we don't know the specifics around that because a lot of the information is redacted. They also say that they thought they'd be compensated for their services, and as of the date of filing the complaint, they apparently have still not received compensation promised by the defendants for their time there. Contestant 5, who is another female contestant, also says that they have not been paid. And the rest of the lawsuit basically goes into the laws that were potentially broken by what's going on here. For example, not paying minimum wage, or, you know, preventing sexual harassment from occurring in the workplace, failure to pay overtime wages for the time that they spent there that was above the typical amount of time that somebody would work, failing to provide uninterrupted meal breaks, not giving them enough time to rest, failing to pay the people once they were terminated, you know, because typically you want to be paid immediately, and that, you know, the allegations being made here is that didn't happen. And that's pretty much it for the actual information that we can glean from the lawsuit. The rest is a lot of legalese and stuff like that, but we've gone through the most important stuff. Now, as far as the truth of these allegations, ultimately for legal purposes, these are still allegations. They haven't been proven in a court of law. There's been no settlement reached or anything like that, so it's hard to tell how this is going to go. If I had to guess, based on the claims made here and how consistent they are with other claims made by people from the New York Times and, you know, different journalists reaching out to different people, I would guess that at the very least, some of this stuff is true, but I don't know which specific claims because I wasn't there. I don't have proof for it, so I don't know what the fuck is going on. But what I can say is that this is a very bad look for MrBeast, not only from the perspective of like optics, but also because it's bad to mistreat people. And ultimately, it seems like a lot of this stuff probably could have been avoided with better preparation and planning. Now, what I'm really curious to see is how this is going to affect future MrBeast productions, because I would imagine if this lawsuit is settled for a large sum of money, or let's say MrBeast loses the lawsuit, they don't get to a settlement, right, and he has to pay out a ton of money, I'm very curious how that's going to go for him, and also how it's going to go for his deal with Amazon. Because keep in mind, it's not just him, it's him and Amazon being sued and one other company, which means that if this goes through and if they lose, it's not only a very bad look for the release of this show, which hasn't even come out yet, you know, people are going to have a very negative perception of it ahead of time, but on top of that, it's just very bad for future deals. I would guess that Jimmy Donaldson is going to have a very, very hard time securing any future TV deal of this nature, and deservedly so if this is all true, because, you know, what the fuck? How? Just like how, you know? How? So yeah, that's about it for today's video. Hope you guys found it interesting. I definitely did, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Goodbye.